Let me first set the ground. Tamil prosody is not my research area, so this is not sharing my research findings. So mostly from the other researchers' writings, and what I'm trying to do is kind of synthesizing what has been said. There is a lot that has been written about Tamil prosody, mostly in Tamil, and I see two problems in what I read. One is that the focus is on the details, not on some of the general trends or general ideas. And the second thing is they assume a lot on the part of the readers. If you want me to, if I can give an analogy, suppose you read a paper on sickle cell anemia. It doesn't say anything about cell. It simply says that it's a cell which has a bent shape or something like that. So it doesn't help you if you don't know the basics of that. So I'm trying to make things explicit. And added to this problem is much more than the other grammar. The prosodic grammar uses a meta-language, and that's a very elaborate meta-language, so you'll have to get familiar with the meta-language. I will show you how it works as we go along. And so, consequence of not being my own research is that some of the conclusions I would, some of the generalizations I will make should be taken as tentative or as a hypothesis which it had to find out. So in that sense, it is an exploratory class. I mean, let us explore together what is in Tamil prosody. To give you a little background, there are two nodal points in the development of description or theory of prosody. One is Tolkappiyam, and the next one is Yapparangalam, and then Veerasoliyam gives a third nodal point. In the Tamil pedagogical tradition, the Yapparangalam has taken over. So people, I mean, all the classes for MA or any course would be on Yapparangalam. That means that giving a gist of what serial is. So I'm trying to sort of complicate the things. I mean, bring up the things which are still, I mean, it is not very simple kind of thing. And as a part of, as a reflection of, I mean, I see a difference between Tolkappiyam and Nannul. I mean, if you equate Nannul with Yapparangalam, even after Nannul, which is a prescribed text for any Tamil course, you would still have Tolkappiyam. Right? So both would be studied. Whereas when it comes to prosody, it is Yapparangalam. I never had serial in my master's. Actually, I didn't even have Yapparangalam because I joined in the middle of the of the course. The study of Sayurial, which is this chapter on prosody in Tolkappiyam, is only by way of research by various scholars. It's not part of the Tamil pedagogical tradition. And added to that, there is a kind of negative view about Tamil prosody among the modern poets in particular. See, there are two terms which are crucial in prosody. One is yapu, which has two senses. One is build. So yapu as talking about how a poem is built, and the other thing is bind. So the yapu also deals with how the form binds meaning. These are the two aspects in which the Tamil prosody is organized. But the general view of the modern poets is to look at it in the in the meaning of bind, in the sense of it binds your freedom, right? It binds your tongue, right? So one way of writing poetry in modern period is to get away from yapu. I think I was also influenced to some extent by this when I wrote poems in my college days. Right? So I have I had to come out of that negative feeling about Tamil and prosody. But this is interesting in two ways from the Tamil pedagogical point of view. One is if you take modern linguists and their approach to Tolkapiam or other traditional grammar, it is some kind of admirational and an interest to know what that says about grammar, often in comparison with Bloomfield or Chomsky or Pawnee and things like that, or it will be just indifferent, right? To see, you think that it has it is not relevant for modern linguistics. On the other hand, with regard to prosody, I find that there is a continuous interest in prosody, even in the modern period. I mean, I'm not talking about poets, which I said that they have resistance to that, but the modern scholars are interested in studying studying in the prosodic works. Right. In spite of what I said about the modern poets, I should also point out that there is some attempt to understand the classical theory of poetry and prosody. For example, Pudhimapittan, the fatherhead of Tamil Shah story, says that Tamils have a perfect understanding of the form of poetry. And this is his statement. And then there is another, what's called now the new poet, the poet of a new poet, Woman C. Money, who was one of the pioneers of that. He has written a small booklet of introducing Yapu to the modern writers. And then there is one Selvam, who also serialized the information about prosody in one of the little magazines, which is quite almost adversarial to traditional poetry and literature. So one way one could look at it is the controversy which we find in our field, what is the colonial modernity, see whether it's a break from the old or it's reconfiguration, to use the word of Shulman. So you find that there are both views. Some take it as a break. I mean, new poetry is nothing to do with classical poetry, and there is another view that can you find new poetry as an extension of old poetry? At least as far as I know, there are two books which talk about applying the prosodic rules to to what's called free verse, or what's called the new poetry. So, I mean, you find both kinds of things, right? And when you look at the literature written about Tamil prosody, as I said, there is plenty of writing, including writings, courses on the web, see, about Tamil prosody, right? There are a couple of reasons for this. One is very mundane, which is a question on prosody is a part of any competitive examination. If you write Tamil Nadu Public Service Commission for a clerk's job, you should answer what a Venbai is or something, something like that. So they give a very simplified version of identifying some of the technical terms. I mean, this is liked by students also because, as they believe in Sanskrit, you can get more marks here because the answer is very clear, right? This is the kind of thing. See, the other one is people. Some of the writing, for example, K.V. Jagannathan's Kavi Padalam and things like that, are addressing to budding or aspiring poets how to write poems, right? So I think the third one is, as I said earlier, to understand what this field is about. If you take a traditional master's course in Tamil, it was never a goal to help students to write poetry, right? Which is different from what is called the Oriental course, where Vidwans are trained. So one of the goals is to write poetry. So these books are meant for those people who have to write poetry. They also make it simpler, right? They don't want to frighten away the aspiring poets, giving all complications of prosody, right? And one thing I noticed when I mentioned about continuity, I find that prosodic grammars have been written even now, even up to the 20th century, right? And I mean, you find the continuation of traditional grammar up to this century, but that would be more in terms of explaining certain points, and mostly they would be in prose. But this is in sutra style, so they have written about poetry. Some of the things which have been left out in the older books, for example, Sindhu verse. There's no grammar in the earlier one. So there is one by Murugan on Sindhu Pavial, right? It's all in sutra style. Similarly, one Veeraputra Mudaliya, he wrote, I think, the end of the 19th century, the work on Virtapa. The Virtapa becomes very popular, and so they have a very elaborate grammar. And interestingly, it's not only in the sutra form, they also write commentaries like that. So in that way, this tradition is continued in a traditional way also. Right? Okay. So among the modern scholars, also there is quite a bit of interest in the study of prosody. The people who have written a lot would be S.N. Kandasamy or Annie Thomas or Jayaraman, Manigandan, Srinivasan, and these people have written about these, and many seminars have been organized. So one common trend in this writing is to have a historical look, right? How the prosody developed over a period of time. But I find basically it is like comparing the text and then say this is there, this is not here, and that kind of thing. It doesn't go into explanation of of the thing. So it's more like a textual comparison between Tolkappiyam and Yaparangalam, and that also goes into the details of the different names and things like that. I mean, this I find very making it more intimidating is that there is a trend, as I see it, that what you find as variations in a poetic form, as years go by, are treated as varieties. Right? So then they give a name to it. So then if you have Venba, then there would be umpteen number of kinds of Venbas, with each one would be for a variation, right? And then the varieties become new types of poems, the kind of thing. So in prosody, I find as the development takes place, there is greater interest on taxonomy, right? To define, to put the name. So it's hard to get through the plethora of names of these verses. The other one, which is more interesting from the historical point of view, is to trace the history of development of poetic forms in literature. Right? What is in Sangam, what is in Bhakti, and what is in later Prabandham, and things like that, and trying to relate to the descriptions in the poetic works. Right, but in all these cases, there are disagreement. If you have so two variations or two varieties, A and B, whether A and B came from C, or A is earlier or B is earlier, and all kinds of discussions are taking place, okay, so this is how the thing is here. This is a good example of what I said, that this is Tamil Ilakkana Peragradi is by Kobalaya. It's a kind of dictionary of grammatical concept. About Porul, there are 3 volumes, and this is meant kind of aid to memory. You see, if you have heard something, you don't remember whether it was correct, you can look at it, and there would be a reproduction of what commentators say about this. If you don't know any prosody, you cannot understand what he says in this. So in that way, it's a good check for your memory, right? It's there. So as I said, what I'm trying to do is to do it to people who are uninitiated to prosody, including myself, and say what is involved in that, and also trying to combine both the theoretical questions and historical questions in that, and also I would have some linguistic bias in this one, right? You stop me anywhere if you want to do. I want to look at it as a metrical language, in the sense that it is basically a language with some metrical properties, and in that way you can immediately see the similarities. I mean, any language, whether it is a language of poetry or language of ordinary speech, would be a sequence of sounds which is segmented into words and words into phrases and phrases into sentences. And similar thing you find here. Only thing is the units are different. You see, you would have asai, seed, and things like that. So the one important difference between what you call the natural language and the poetic language is that in the metrical language, the integrity of word is not crucial. Right? The word boundary is often obliterated in constructing longer sequences. We know that it's not only segments which are important in natural language, but also the suprasegmental, what's called prosodic features in some linguistic theory. So you would have certain non-segmental means of differentiating between, say, word and phrases or compounds in an ordinary speech. If you take an example like palahai, which is a board plant, if you say palakai, then it's a many hands. So see, in prosody, it would be one seed, like that. So here you have a pass, right, with palahai. But what we'll find when we go through this is that pass does play a role in prosody also in terms of measuring the units. Some other examples are like in Tamil, when you say Pattu Pattu, it would refer to the Sangam anthology. If you say Pattu Pattu, then it would be 10 songs, right? So there is name and the phrase, and then our Sollikodu would be teach, and Sollikodu means tell and give. So the pause is made use of used to make the distinctions. But also you have intonational differences. See, for example, you say in colloquial Tamil, Nana Sonne would be I said that myself, and Nana Sonne would be did I say that, right? But in prosody, I find that what you find is what I have called rhythmic differences rather than intonational differences. So intonation is a property of, say, music, right? So the poems also could be set to music, but I think that's a different way of framing a poem, which is different from what prosody talks about under the name of osai. So the osai is a rhythm, and the structure of a line in a poem determines what the rhythm is, and this could be set to music, either in the Pan system of Devaram or in the Carnatic system, because scholars say that for Venba, Sankarabharanam is the best raga and things like that. So that's a kind of pairing these two things. You see, that the music is not an integral part of that. I think that is also true when people argue that the origin of all these things are the folk songs, right? So maybe that is true, but when it comes to the poetry, the rhythm takes over. See, the rhythm is the crucial one. So when if you look at it as a metrical language with some differences from the natural language, one thing which is striking is that natural language is acquired without any effort. Right? Everybody speaks picks up the language, but poetic language is not such. Mm-hmm. It's like a second language. As you learn the rules of the language, but people, Tamil tradition also has what's called Asukavi. They just sing as if it's your native language. So that means they have mastered the units of the metrical language, right? Yeah. So the okay. So I mentioned about the rhythm, which is the translation I have given for Vosai, which is very important in prosody. There are 4 Vosais identified. One is Ahaval. Ahaval is related to calling, right? So in Kurundoha you have an Ahavan Mahal, which refers to a fortune teller. Mm-hmm. So this is fortune telling, like calling the forces to tell about your life. So this Osai is Ahaval Osai. This Ahaval Osai is identified with Asriyappa. Right? Asriyappa has Ahaval Osai. I try to avoid prescriptive terms, but sometimes it might come in. If you read literature, they say Asriyappa should have Ahaval Osai, right? Vinba should have Ahaval Osai, right? But you can look at it. These are the properties of the past, right? Okay. The other is Seppalosai. Seppu is an answer to your question. So the Seppalosai is the kind of question and answer thing, like of dyad, right? Question and answer. This Seppalosai is identified with Venba, right? And the third one is called Tulal. Tulal is jump up and down. And commentators give the analogy of a calf jumping up and down. And that is called Tulal. Tulal Osai. That is the one for Kalipa. And the last one is Tungal. Tungal is hanging. So this is hanging in the sense of okay. The Osai ends at the end of a line in a poem, whereas Tungal Osai would end at the end of each chief. Right? So if a line has 2 chiefs, so it ends one chief, and then the rhythm ends there, and then the second one, and like that. But there is also another interpretation which Ilamburnar gives, which Kobalayar also follows, is that is a kind of sliding one, right? The rhythm slides, but it seems that the most common interpretation is about how you cut. So, this, as I see it, the Osai is an important part of Tamil prosody. As I said, it's not necessarily singing, it's the rhythm of reading that. I think I was able to find a video where this is sung in the way they should be sung. We listened to it in one of the meetings. I have two problems. We will see the problems as we go along. That is, basically it is the relationship between osai and the form, or the line, right? So there are two possibilities. One is the osai is defined by the structure. So if you have a structure of asariyapa, it will have ahaval osai. If you have a structure of enba, you would have sepal osai, etc. That is one way of explaining osai. This is what commentators suggest, I would say, when they say that we'll come to that. So, talai is a concept which is a collocation between two seeds. So they will say that talai tattadu means that there is a bump, right? So like a road bump in that. So that would disturb the rhythm. So that would suggest, at least that suggested to me that the rhythm is created by the way seeds are organized in a line. But they also look at it this way, that this poem follows all the definitions of say Venba or Asariyapa, but osai didn't come. Right. Right. So that means that osai is independent of that, and then there is a matching. So my feeling is that in their idea that osai and the structure or seed are kind of mutual relationship. It's not one is primary and the other follows it. And interestingly, osai is not one of the units of Seiyur according to Tolhapia's Sutram. Okay. Now, I think...
Can I ask one question about that, sir? So could it be then that osai is, so to say, it's combinatoric? It's like a combination of multiple of those features. So I mean, what you suggested that do you have what in Western language you call the scansion of the patterns of nirai and ner, and then you have talai describing the binding between the different feet, and then it sounded like what you were saying is that osai kind of emerges at the intersection of those, potentially. That's a hypothesis. It emerges at the intersection of those multiple different ways of organization.
Yeah, that's one way, but I think it is more than that. One is the arrangement of seeds contribute to osai, right? And the second one is the nature of the seed itself, whether it is 2 asai or 3 asai, like that. And the third one is the matre also contributes to something. So it's a combination of these three things. That's what I hypothesize as contributing to osai. And the fourth one is talai, which takes care that certain collocations are not allowed. The kind of thing. But when you read the commentaries of Tolhapiam, they say that they find examples of osai in the natural world, right? So it is like a bullock cart running on a road, or it is like horse galloping and things and things like that. So it doesn't mean that it pre-existed, but at least they associate it with some of the sounds of the natural world. See, for me, the problem is without any independent way of verifying what Vosa is, right? There is no notational system, right? So it is only a kind of subjective feeling, right? So you read a poem, say, oh, it doesn't sound like Nasiriyappa. It has all the features of Nasiriyappa, but it doesn't sound like Nasiriyappa. I don't know how they say that.
Sure.
Okay?
But in the commentators, do we get examples of it? Do you have an example?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think in one of the video, I think he contrasts that also why this is not Nasiriyappa. Things like that. So this seems to be more part out of the oral tradition. I mean, people were singing in a particular rhythm, and they know what the rhythm is, and things like that. Now it is not there in the transmission of these poems, and it is further made difficult with these new editions where Sandhi is removed, right? So the Sandhi is crucial in maintaining the rhythm. So see, now in the current generation, the link between Osai and this past structure is delinked. So in that case, from the traditional point of view, it's extremely difficult to say whether the pa meets the required Osai, or not. So it becomes more formal kind of thing, right? Okay. Yeah. So the let's say the word used for a poem or a verse, let's say verse, is Seyul. That's what Tolhapia uses it, and this is a derived word from the root say, and ul is a derivative. Suffix Tamil lexicon uses this derivative suffix for paitul, which modern equivalent is paichal. So instead of paichal, chal as a derivative suffix, tul is a derivative suffix, or even in, I would say that even in words like kadavul or cowl for the jaw, all these things, ul is a derivative suffix. So sayur, ul could be taken as a derivative suffix. Even with other words like urul, arul, I think ul could be traced as a derivative suffix or formative suffix. So the say gives the sense of it's a composition. It's a and as we would agree that you could interpret it to mean that it is doing something to the language and doing something with the language. That is what poetry is about, right? It is playing with the language. So so that is the conceptualization of Seyul, and Tolhapiam. In the first sutra of Seyurial, I think Seyurial in Tolhapiam, in the third part, is the largest chapter with about 230 sutras or something like that. So the traditional scholars in Tamil believe that all chapters lead towards Seyurial. Sayurial is the goalpost, which is the last but one chapter in the three parts of that. I mean, that makes some sense because when you talk about the units of Sayur, two units are Matrai and Eluthu. Matra is Matra, that is what the duration. Eluthu is letter or the phonetic segment. And Tolkappiyar doesn't say anything about these two units in Sayurial. He refers to Eluthudiharam, where these things are explained. Right. Whereas when you come to Apparangalakare, there is a separate section on Eluthu to describe that. So this, the independent grammars of Yapu have this consequence of making certain aspects of Sayur not to be derived from other parts of the grammar, but it should be independently explained here. So one is the composition. Also, Tolkappiyam contrasts Sayur with Vazhakku, right? The grammar is about Vazhakku and Sayur. Vazhakku, in my reading, is not does not refer to spoken language, as some linguists try to say. I think it is the ordinary language, as opposed to the artificial or the composed language of poetry. So the Varangi is something which is around, see, like the natural language, whereas this is made into being, right, by Pulavas, right, not by the ordinary speaker. So the Sayur is what is composed by Pulavar, and Tolkappiyam himself says that they have Pulanneri Arindo, those who know the ways of knowledge, if you take Pulan as knowledge of mind. So it needs certain rules which you had to master, see, to compose that. So in that sense, it is compositional. It is also versified as opposed to Vazhakku. Then there are other terms also used in Tolkappiyam itself. See, the one is pa. Tolkappiyam itself uses the word pa as an synonym of Sayur, as well as pa as a unit of Sayur. I think one thing we will come across here is that the kind of multiple use of a term for different technical senses. One is pa, and the pa is one unit of Sayur in one sense. In another sense, it is the Sayur, right? And another word is patu, which is also used by Tolkappiyam and others. And the third one is padal. So these are the other terms for Sayur in the sense of a poem. These three terms are found in Sangam corpus also. So I would derive pa from the verb, from the verbal meaning of weaving. Right? So in modern Tamil, it has become pavu, which is weave. Right? So it is a weaving with words. You see, that is that's a pa, and padal comes from padu, which is singing. So that's a relationship between the delivery of a poem, and kavitai, which is a common term used now for a poem is much is a later one. Tamil lexicon gives the first attestation only in Bhakti poems, you see, for Kavita. So Kavita is not in the Sangam corpus. Okay. So the okay. So the first sutram of Tolkappiyam about Seiyul lists 34 items as Uruppu. Right? Seiyul Uruppu. Right? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll come to the problems of these Uruppus. And besides Seiyul, there are 6 other kinds. Let me see. So one is Seiyul as a pa, right? Another is Seiyul also refers to other 6 kinds of composition. Right? And the 6 kinds of composition include Urai, and the Urai includes what's called Uraida Itta Pattuda Seiyul, that is the Urai which comes in between poetic lines, which is which has some prosodic features, and also it includes Tolkappiyar line is that Urai which comes out of poetry, which I think means commentary, right? So the only thing I could think of is that if you read the Urai of Reinar Hapurul Urai, it is more like versified. It has all these todai and things like that. But the later ones become more like prose kind of thing. So maybe Tolkappiyam had that kind of thing in mind, the commentary. The other one, which is non-poetic Seiyul, is Nool. I mean, Nool is what's Shastra in Sanskrit, right? So that's why you have Nulpa, right? So the Nulpa is a sutram, so that would also have in a Seiyul form. So Seiyul form in the sense, not necessarily in a poetic form, but in the versified form. And then he includes 4 others. One is the term he used is Pisi. Pisi. Yeah, I mean, one problem I should mention here is that many of the terms which Tolkappiyam uses need to, are more enigmatic. I mean, the meaning is not obvious or self-explanatory. So the commentators differ among themselves, and also the later development of prosody in Tamil ignored many of the units which Tolkappiyam sets up. Right? So there is no elaboration of those concepts. Right? As we see, okay, I'll come to that. So I think it is relevant here to point out what Perasariyar says about Seiyuliyal and these terms. He says that Agasthyam is the Mudal Nool, is the first nool for Seiyul, and Tolkappiyam abbreviated it for people like us. Right? So I think what he means is that there are many things Tolkappiyam left unexplained because it's all in Agasthyam. Right? So they are trying to find out about this enigma of these these terms, right? So okay, so one is we should understand that Seyur, in the sense of versified composition, has two parts. One is the real poem, pa, the other one, the other six of composition. The other one is of the 34 in the sutra, which I sent you. See, you could see that he makes a division between 26 and 8. Right? In the first part of the list has 26, and then the second part has 8 things. Right? So it is. It's very. It's not very clear why that kind of distinction necessary. Right? Again, the commentators give different explanations. If you take Ilamburunar, he simply says Oru Nigarattana. They are not of the same. They are not on par. Right? He doesn't say what difference is between the two subsets of the units of Seyur. And when you come to the modern authors, they put the second set of 8 into a generic category of Vanapu, which is beauty. Right? So it's about aesthetics of poetry, not about the structure of poetry. Right? That also is problematic. See, another scholar, V.S.P. Manikam, says that the 8 are applicable to what's called in Tamil Thodarnilaicheyul, that is the long ones like epics and things like that. And the first 26 are for Tani Nilaicheyul. Right? That also doesn't work in that. So, anyway, so he makes two level categorization of the units. Right? The units, the name given by unit is Urupu, right, which is picked up by Apparangalam and all others who follow that. Urupu is I mean, the meaning of Urupu is part, right? Body part, usually, or any part. So it could the literal translation would be a limb or organ. Yeah, Chevier translates it as limbs of poetry. I mean, that is true. But from the way Prosody understands it, I think that it is more than a mechanical view or even a biological view of the relationship between Seyul and Urupu. In the commentatorial style, he asks the question. He puts the question in the mouth of a student and says that if this is a list of Seyur, what is Seyur? Right? Then he answers that question. As we say, good question, he says, Nandu Gadavinai. Right? Good question. And then he answers it by saying that these are all parts. I mean, this relationship is the relationship between part and whole. So if you know Sinai, if you know the parts, you will know the Mudal. And the Mudal is Seyur. Right? So he seems to think that the description of the Urupu is in a way it constitutes a poem. Right? It's not mechanical building of a poem, but it constitutes the poem. So the poem poem doesn't exist before this, right? So it's a kind of ideation construct, right? From this. that seems to be an interesting view of looking at this. So the okay. So the okay. So this okay. So if you take this Urupu and the relationship between Urupu and Seyur, as I just now said, as viewed by Perasria, is not taken up by the later grammarians. They take it as an independent thing. So if you take Tolkapiam Sayurial Sutram, one gives all these things together. Right? Whereas in Yapurungalam, you will have two chapters. One chapter is called Urupiyal, and another is Sayurial, as if these are two separate things. I think that is one shift, right, in the later period. The other one is the view that the 34 or even 26 Urupu, the miscellany of that, right? People have hard time to find out why all these things are said. You see, in this one. One view is that it is not about the limbs of Sayur or units of Sayur, but it is the units of Sayurial, right? What is in Sayurial? I mean, Sayurial talks all about that. I think Xavier picks up this idea and says that this is a list of contents of Sayurial. Right?
Okay.
Right. But I don't think that's right, because no chapter Tolkapiam gives a list of content to what follows. And then, as we just now said about Perasria's view, it's all about how the poem is constituted with all these things. So if you look at broadly what goes into, this is my interpretation on this, so what goes into the Urupu is, one, the building blocks, right, the physical structure, and the other one is, you could call the how this structure takes place, right? And the third dimension of that would be basically the content, what is produced. So one way of looking at this is that the Urupu of Sayur consists of the building blocks and the process of building, and also the product that comes out of that. So I think he's trying to put all three into the sutra to explain Sayur. Okay. So he talks about, for example, when it comes to content, he talks about Tinai, he talks about Turai, he talks about Ketpur, he talks about things like that, right? So you cannot consider them as a unit, as a building block, but this is the content. And interestingly, the content is about aham, right? I mean, from Tinai, the example he gives, like Kaihol, which is Kalavu and Karpu, the commentators try to include Puram also, because of the theory that Puram is the converse of aham. But in the sutra itself, you see, there is no clue that he is talking about Puram. So, I mean, he is thinking of poem as an aham poem, basically. This one, maybe And the other problem is to include yapu and pa as urupu, right? So pa, as I said, in one sense it is Seyur itself, right? When you say Asariya pa, so it is Asariya Seyur. The other one is it's a pa in the sense of what you feel about it. I mean, see, a poem gives you certain feeling, right? Certain response to that. I think that's what he means. You see, right? So our yapu. See, yapu is a term which is also used in multiple senses. One is yapu in the sense of prosody, that is the physical elements which compose a poem, and also it is used in the sense of poetry. So he would say that. I mean, Tolhapinsa uses it in that sense. But in this sutra, as a unit of poem, I think Perasrier explains it well. He says that he cites the Tolhapin Sutram, so it binds the structure to meaning. Right? That is yapu. It's not the yapu of the physical structure. That's also is included under yapu. But also there is another binding, which is with the meaning. Right? The Tolgap Sutram itself, one sutram says that Porlodu Nattal yapu enbas, means something like that. So I think Perasrier gives an example where you have a poetic line following the prosodic rules, but it is meaningless. Right? You say it's not pa. Right? It's something like Chomsky's colorless green ideas, leave furiously. Right. It's a syntax, right? You have the syntactic rule, but it is not a proposition. Right? The same way the pa is meant to say something which comes from the structure, right? The yapu. Yapu binds it, and the pa is much more than the meaning. It's a sense, or it's a feeling you get about that. Yeah.
Sorry, but in this case, then I failed the metrical utterance in a way. It's a sentence which has no. How does it fail? Because it's not the natural meaning that yapu is bringing about. It's this additional. I mean, what it means that it fails?
Fails in meaning?
Yeah, that it fails in meaning, that yapu doesn't make the linking, right? Because I just to understand it better, because it's not like...
The example he gives is what grammarians usually give, is he constructs... I'll give you that. I mean, it's a good example, better example. The one he gives is using muyat kombu, the horn of the rabbit, which doesn't exist, so it doesn't have any meaning. I mean, this is a standard trope in Sanskrit grammars. And so muyal kombu is one non-existential thing. Yeah, I think this is a good example which Perasrier gives, right? He gives a line, he says that Sattan undan, kottan undan. Sattan undan, kottan undan. This follows Asariya meter. But it doesn't mean anything as a poem.
Okay.
Right? So you fulfill the criterion of the meter of Asariya. But will he call it a poetic line? He says no.
Okay.
Right? So that's the kind of examples he says that eliminated by the notion of pa, right? Or yapu in this case, right? I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. That I mean, that's a very. In other words, what Prosody says is that poetry is not about factual statements, right? Like Sattanundan, Kottanundan. Right? It is something more to that. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a quick look at the various other things he has, see in the I'll just read it and then we'll move on. As I said, that see the other urupu is tinai, which I mentioned, and also kaihol, which is the thematic behavior, kalavu and karpu, and also he says kutru vahai kinds of speeches you have in poem, and also ketpo, the addressees are in general interlocutors, see, in a poem, and also he says kalan, there should be a locale, and column, there should be a time in which the poem is said, and also he includes here vannam, that is basically a sound effect from a poem, right? You would have all verses in hard consonants and that kind of thing, and he also said payan, right? What Besky is trying to say looking forward, right? So the payan is also interpreted in a different way. I mean, very generic interpretation would be the yield of a poem. I mean, what you get out of the poem, and then interestingly he adds meipad. Also in the, that is the emotional impact of poem is also he lives under urupu of a poem.
And so with a lot of these, since with this from Tirnai Kaikol, Borovahai Kerpo, etc. Since all of these kind of infringe on the Tirnai Yil,
yes.
Does he just? Is it just a recapitulation of that, or is it?
No, I think that he takes Agapatu is par excellence of poetry, right? And he gives example of that. I wouldn't say that he rules out all kinds of poems, because he talks about Devar Paravum, all that kind of thing.
I know with Mayparda, he's talking about something different here. I mean, he's using the same term, but it seems to actually be quite different than what he talks about in the Mayparda deal. Because he's talking about, this is a longer discussion, but he's talking about a different, he's talking about the kind of overall emotional slash, the overall impact, we might say, that doesn't have to do with getting into the details of the individual, we later called suvais.
Yeah, but it's connected to that, right? He says the poem should have suvai.
He doesn't use the word, but I don't think.
Yeah, no, I mean, Maypadu in that sense, rasa. Right.
But he seems to mean this is a different. He seems to be talking about something that Dundon, for instance, would call bhavika, in this mention of Mayparda. So I'm curious to know. So this is, as you say, this is just more. This is more capacious, the terms he gives here, and then in the Ahatirnaiyil he then specifies to talk about what is the best kind of poetry. Yeah, okay.
But even here it won't exceed the 8 which he gives in Mayparda, right? So he gives a generic name, but it doesn't mean that it is something different from the 8 or more than the.
But he's operating a higher level of generality here.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, this is what some scholars like Tamiran say, that the Seiyuvel Sutram is about poetics, not our prosody. Right? And these things were not developed later, right? They were separated from that. So you could look at these things as elements to understand the poetics of poetry rather than the prosody of poetry. Right? So the sutram is about both aspects of poetry. This is what Japarangalam separates. Right? Right. So that becomes more the structural side or the physical side of that. Right? I don't know whether this comes from another tradition in Sanskrit or something. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the one interesting thing is that Omai is not one of the urupus. Right? So Ani is taken out of that.
Right.
Right? So one reason could be, as we saw when we read Omayal, is he is focusing on meaning creation with Omai rather than beauty creation or something like that. But anyway, that is a thing which needs an explanation. See why Omai is not part of Seyul when Meipadu is. You have any answers? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Okay. So. Okay. So. Yeah. As I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, there has been a long tradition even before Tolkapiam, whether Agasthyam existed or not, about prosody, because in Seyuriyal he uses terms like Yapari Pulavar, Noolnavil Pulavar, Thonnari Pulavar, Vermoli Pulavar, Vaimoli Pulavar, Nallasai Pulavar, all talk about some aspect of prosody. Right? So he is citing that. And then after Tolkapiam is a long list of people who wrote prosody before Amatasagara comes into the scene. I mean, it starts with Mayecharar. I mean, and then Kake Padini by legend was a classmate of Tolkapiam. But many of the break with Tolkapiam starts with Kakepadiniyam. And Yaparangalam picks up from Kakepadiniyam some of the changes which take place. Then there's Avinayam, etc. Right? Then one more point about Osai, which I didn't mention. Perasier makes an interesting point about the importance of Osai in a poem. Right? He says that an illiterate person, a person who is not nearby when somebody reads the poem, could say this is Hasaryam by listening to it. Right? So, in this view, Osai is the frame, see, to frame the poem. Right? So, the prosody is just a skeleton, right? So, without knowing what is inside, by the rhythm, you would know what kind of poem it is, right? So that gives primacy to Osai, right? I'm still struggling the relationship between the structure and sound and the Osai, the rhythm. Commentators themselves have a different views about that. But Osai is crucial because it's crucial at the same time. Tolkapir has not included it as a urupu. So it's not in one of the 34.
Well, interestingly, following from that principle, you could make something that has the correct Osai for a given pavanam and have it be meaningless, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it just seems it's a different. I mean, if the meaning conditions are somehow belong inside this set
Yeah.
of 34 elements, then Osei's just works differently.
Yes, right. But it helps you to classify past.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Say you right. You don't have to know the meaning to say
Right.
whether something is asariyam or not. Right. But it is not pa. It's asariyam, but it's not pa if it
Doesn't
not meaningful.
Right.
Right. So the meter is determined by osai, right, which could be meaningful or meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
But if it for a meter to become pa or seyul, it should be meaningful.
Right.
Yeah, that seems to be his. I mean, the exact word in another sutra is குறித்த பொருளை முடிய நாட்டல் யாப்பு. குறித்த பொருளை முடிய நாட்டல் யாப்பு. And குறித்த பொருள், the intended meaning, முடிய நாட்டல். That's what I mean. And the commentators explain it nicely that the meaning you intended to convey is conveyed in the poem. It would not be conveyed with one line less. It cannot be conveyed with one line more. Right? So there's a perfect match between the structure and the meaning. Right? So that he calls yapu. Right? Yeah. I mean, the general meaning of yapu we all know. See, it's ya is tying or binding and things like that, and the body is called yake, see, which holds the life. Right? So so here again, see, it is yapu is one, the body, but also it is something which connects life to body. Right? So he uses it in both sense, right? The physical as well as the connection to the meaning. Right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then yeah, let's go into the urupu, right? Okay. You have any questions at this point?
And so
Yeah.
you said that there is no actually explicit treatment of osai as a system.
Independent. There is no independent description of osai as a system.
Okay.
Does one first see it in the Tolhapium commentaries or in the Yapalangara Virutti, or where?
No, they just give the analogies like this, what it corresponds with. Right? But there is no, like in prosody, you have meta-language to describe that. There is no meta-language to describe osai. See, that's why it is difficult to say whether the metrical construct gives you the osai, or you have osai and you make a construction to fit that. Right?
I'm reminded there's a quote from I once read in an interview with John Coltrane where he said something about nothing swings like 4/4. So 4/4, the most common meter in Western, most common measure in Western music, it has a quality that he's ascribing to it of swingingness, of tungal, and so that's so yeah, it seems to be something equivalent to that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. 4 is a good number.
Right.
Tamil prosody also, right? Okay. Good. Okay. So let us start with the first one, Matirai. Okay. One thing, again, Prosody makes an interesting statement that these words used in prosody, the grammar of poetry come from the world, right? He says, "Ulahir mori" or something like that. So it's an words of ordinary language given technical sense, right? That's a common observation, but he makes that point that these words are in the language, and the grammarians give the specific grammatical meaning to them. Right? Yeah. 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 Before that, I should mention among the Urupu, there is another one called Marabu. Right? And the commentators explain Marabu this way. So it refers to Sol Marabu, right? And the Sol Marabu is what is given in HVL in Soladiganam. The first sutra of that is 4 kinds of words which are found in poetry, right? Vadasol, Yekchol, Tirisol, Tisechol, Vadasol, Aseyulitachol. So these are the 4 kinds of words which are found in Seyul, right? So here, Yechol, literally it means a natural word. So here it refers to the Tamil word. Not only Tamil word, my understanding of that sutra is that it is also refers to one word, one meaning. Right? It's a clear, straightforward thing. So the listing of 4 words is not only for composing the poetry, but also for interpreting it. I mean, these are the other one is Tirisol. Commentators differ in explaining Tirisol. One is Tirisol would include the opposite of Yetzol, that is a word which has more than one meaning, homonyms, and also the different words having the same meaning, right? Synonym. Right? So here you don't have one-to-one relationship. It's a kind of deviance. So you should be aware of that when you write poem. And then Tisechol would be the dialect words or the regional words, which you'd also you'll find in poetry. The last one is Vadasol, which is a foreign word. So these are the words permissible in poetry. So the Perasrier gives this understanding of Marabu, but he goes one step. This Marabu also includes the another sutra in Tolhapiam, like Vadasol Kilavi, Vadavalaturi, right? So you should use the Sanskrit Prakrit words in a Tamilized forms without using the sounds which are not in Tamil, right? I don't think, as the many modern scholars interpret, it's a kind of ideological statement. It is for the purpose of oversight, right? You see, the Tamil sounds give certain kinds of rhythm, and when you bring in aspirates and voiced and things like that, you see, it would disturb that kind of I think that's the intention of saying that, and that's also included under Marabu, right? And Perasrier goes one step further and says that the literary tradition also should be there, Um, but what I found interesting is he adds another line, says that if a speaker of a foreign language, maybe Prakrit, Sanskrit, writes poetry in Tamil, he or she should follow the Tamil Marabu. Right? So you cannot write a Prakrit word in a Prakrit meaning.
Okay.
You should write it in the Tamil meaning of that. I thought that was interesting.
Well, and importantly, this is a point you've made to me before, and I'm always sort of that. I mean, you can't do it. You have to do it in Tamil, orthography, Tamil spelling as well, or else you won't be able to make it into a metrical shape. Right?
Yeah, right. The same thing with the semantic. I mean, he goes to semantic. I mean, every language has a semantic tradition, right? So you should stick to that kind of tradition. Yeah. So another thing I forgot. I mean, all commentators also agree with another Sol Marabu. One is the 4 kinds of words for poetry. The other one is what's called special lexical words, like the young ones of animals have separate names for different animals, and male and female have different names for animals, and a poet should follow those things. So the lexical tradition also includes that. Okay. So going to this Mathirai, it is used in grammar of the natural language, as well as in the grammar of prosody. One question is that it is duration of a phonetic segment, right? That's basically Mathirai is about, right? Whether it is duration of articulation or duration of acoustics. I think that they are talking only about articulation, not what you hear. I think, right? Articulation, see what is the what's the duration? See, that would explain why a and ka have the same Mathirai. Right? I think at least acoustically they are different, right, in terms of measurement, but articulatorily they seem to be the same duration. So what I would like to point out here is there are some differences between this concept of Mathirai. I mean, as Parag said, it is used in some sense in the ordinary language. From that you create a technical term. But even as a technical term, this has a difference in the grammar of the ordinary language and the grammar of the metrical language. Let me give one example. So in ordinary language, you count matra of a word, right? Right? And you count matra in measuring an assai. We'll see that later, right? The later one is called alahidudal, that is measuring the assais. Right? The other is kanakidudal, right? Aindu Mathirai or Aru Mathirai, like you can see like that. That is in the ordinary language, right? So the way they are used is different in metrical grammar as well as in compared to the ordinary language. That's number one. And number two, they are not the same in terms of their quality. Let me put it this way. So the Mathirai let's say that it refers to a phonetic segment. There are three broad categories of phonetic segments. One is normal, and the normal has two subdivisions, which is kuril and nedil, that's short and long. And then you have elongation of that, right, which is called adabadai. Adabedu is the verb, so it increases the adabu, that is the elongation. The other one is kurkam. That's shortened than its phonetic segment as it occurs as an independent letter. Right? So these are the three broad categories of phonetic segments. Right? Tolkapiam uses in his description of Eluthiharam, the elongation comes only when he talks about Vilivettumai, that is calling somebody, the eighth case, right? So it will become B like that. You see, the vowel would be elongated. Whereas when it comes to one more thing which is relevant to ordinary grammar is the elongation as a result of inflection. Right? Kuri would be another inflection for kurivi, which is a later form. So kuru plus e gives you not kurivi but kuri. Right? Talu plus e, past tense, gives tali rather than thaluvi, right? So this is one kind of elongation which is purely grammatical, which has a name of sol adabadai. Right? Is to create a new word, right? That has no special status in prosodic grammar. But the other elongation is divided into two categories. One is Inisai Adabadai. Yeah, Inisai, you know the meaning of that, which is believed to contribute to the Vosai. Right? Inisai. Right? This concept is important. We'll see it later, because whenever there is a break in the rule of prosody, right, they will say, no, Inisai comes, so it is acceptable. Right? So Inisai becomes a judgmental thing, right? And whether there is a prosodic rule is broken or not. Right? The other is the extra elongation is to fill in the need of an asai. Right? So the poet is conscious that there is a break in the osai, so he adds something to that. That's called Seyul Asabadai, Seyul Adabadai. Right? So, you could see that the elongation concept, which goes under Mathirai, is extended beyond what is in grammatical description required. And also they add Vattalabadai. So the Vattalabadai is when a consonant is elongated or elongated, right? If you have like kalang, it will kalang something like that, or mel something. Something like that. So these do play a role, as we see later, in alagirdal, see, in measuring, measuring and asai. So when it comes to kurukam, so what is described in grammar section is that the contextually determined phonetic changes, right? Like Kutyaliharam is a good example. When a U is followed by Ya, see, it becomes E, and that is shorter than the regular E, right? That's Kutyaliharam. Or Kutyal Kutilukaram, the shortened U, is determined by the context in which it occurs. That is, when it is with a plosive consonant and at the end of the word, like Patu or Veedu and things like that. So when it comes to prosody, the idea is expanded to something in the middle of a word also. Right? So the Kutilukaram comes in that. So we'll see later how it plays a role in Asai. That. And also you have the other one, Maharakurkam. Maharakurkam, Ma has Im has half matra as a pure consonant, but when it comes after another nasal like pon, right? Pon is derived from polum, right? After U is dropped, yal is nasalized, you get pon. That yam has lesser matra than ma otherwise. So that is that would not be the case if you have something like Padinmar. That's also you have a nasal sequence, but that yam is not right. So this is phonotactically contextualized the pronunciation, and then you have Auhara Kurukam and Aihara Kurukam. So these are diphthongs, and the diphthongs are pronounced as monophthongs in certain contexts. If you go by the modern pronunciation, Pudaivai for sari would be Pudavai, right? I is A. So instead of two matras, it would have one matra. And that is taken into account in the grammar. So if I can project what we pronounce now to all things, there was some difference in the pronunciation of diphthong. Okay. So when it comes to prosody, these things are made use of. This concept of the normal duration, duration of normal sounds, right? Kuril Nedal distinction, and then elongation, and then the shortening, right? But they play different role in prosody. See, for example, when you say that, say something like kal and kal. See, they are different in Mathura, right? When you come to Asai formation, if you say kalam, kala would be nirayasai. Kalam, then ka would be nerasai, and it would be two asais, not one asai, right? So the length duration also plays a different role when you come to measuring asai. So from this point of view, if you look at the prosodic grammars, see, Ilamburnar thinks that Tolkapium has 15 எழுத்து for Seyur. Right? So this 15, I mean, it is quite different from Mathurai in the other grammar. Let's say here எழுத்து, right? so, so if you take this unit எழுத்து, this is also different in prosody and in grammar. See, in grammar you would have 12 vowels, 18 consonants, and 46 combinations of that. But here, see, the list of எழுத்து they give is உயிர், மெய், குற்றியலிகரம், குற்றியலுகரம், ஆயுதம், குரில், நெடில், அளபடை, வல்லினம், மெல்லினம், இடையினம், ஒற்றளபடை, உயிர்மெய், ஐகாரக் குறுக்கம், மகரக் குறுக்கம். Right. Purely as a linguistic notion, it doesn't make sense because may would include Vallinam, Mellinam, Idainam also. Right? And similarly, when you say Uyir, it would include Kuril and Nedil. But they are distinguished in prosody because of their different implications to Asai formation and also sound. See, the why Vallinam, Mellinam and Idainam are given separately is because of the different sound effects they have. So the எழுத்து is not just referring to members of an alphabet, as you would read in எழுத்து. But when you come to prosody, it's members of creating certain poetic purpose or poetic effect, I think. That is the point I wanted to tell you that we should keep in mind when we see the same terms, Mathurai, Eduthu, and things like that, between ordinary grammar and the metrical grammar. The next one quickly is Asai. Right? This is a basic unit, and this Asai you could say is, I mean, you could give a canonical form as I gave in the handout, like CVCC or I mean CVCC would be a vowel short or long, right? That would be one Asai, and also you have another canonical form. You would have two vowels, like C, V, C, kind of thing. But the important thing to note here is that the எழுத்து here is different from the எழுத்து as understood in the alphabet. We will see some problems like that. So, okay. So they, so to refer to, to refer to these Asai. I mean, Asai is not exactly the syllable because there is more than one nucleus when you have two vowels making Nirai Asai. So it is purely metrical unit, I think. Some people equate it with mora in English prosody, but here there is no stress, there is no weight in the sense of carrying the stress. I think so. Conceptually, this is different from mora in that sense. Okay. So this is one meta language used. One is Nair, right? And that stands for short vowel or a long vowel, right? preceding and following a consonant or not. That's an optional one. That probably comes from the root of near, which means straight, right? When you say neruku near is face to face, something like that. You see, it is straightforward one. And the other one is nirai, which would be a sequence of two short vowels or a short vowel and a long vowel, right? Nirai is one example of that. So the nirai is comes from the root meaning of that, which means an arrangement, right? The ordering or something, a row or sequence. Right? In modern Tamil, you would say nigalchi niral would be a sequence of events in a program, and classical Tamil you have anirai would be the row of cattle. So that is the root for the coinage of this name. Okay. So the asai would be defined by these forms, canonical forms. One is the near asai, which will have that structure of short vowel or a long vowel, and the nirai would have a structure of short vowels or short long vowel. That is the structure. Kake Padani gives a different names for this. He or she calls it Tani asai, that is a single vowel is there, that is near asai, and this is Inai asai, pair, so this is more than one vowel, but that terminology didn't stick. So this also has common name, which is Yelasai. So Yelasai would include both the Neir and Nirai. I mean, Yel is natural. It's natural in the sense of common to all poetic prosodic types. Right? It's elementary one. And opposite of that is Uriyasai. Uriyasai would be an asai which is specific to a particular poem. I mean, in this case, to start with, you could say that what's called so see in this Nerasai, which ends in a consonant, you add wu, then that is one Uriyasai. That is Nervu. Right? And then Nirai, you add u, that is Niraibu. Right? So these are the two extra asai. So so this Asiriyappa has this Nerbu, Niraibu commonly. So this the example which Nachinarkinier gives for this is Vandu, right? Minnu, Nahu, Nanu, Kambu, Tirvu. Right? Another is Varahu, Iravu, Maladu, Ulavu, Kurangu, Punarvu, Malatu, Uraivu. Right? I mean, these are different syllabic structures. They say Uraivu, the last one is a short vowel, long vowel, consonant, and then wu. So one point to note is that these Nervu, Nirebu asais are not restricted to what's called Kutiyalugara in the grammar. So that would be only with the hard consonant, stop consonants, plosive plus U. But here you have nasals and fricatives, right? So it is anything which ends in U, right? So the from the historical point of view is that if this is an if Kutyalugram is a shortened U, but in this aside it includes both shortened U as well as the shortened U. So Tolhapir has 4 asai. Right. Ner, Nirai, Nerbu, Nirebu. Yaparangalam has only 2, Ner and Nirai. So the dropping of Nerbu and Nirebu has some consequences. Right? We will see later when we come to Alahidu, when we come to measuring the asai. There is also a correlation, but I don't know the explanation for it. See, those who have dropped Nervu and Nirevu have also dropped Matrai. See, Tolgaping has Matrai, Eduthu has 2 separate Urupu, right? Nervu, Nirevu has separate asai. But the later grammarians dropped both. I don't know whether there is any causal relationship between the two. So when it comes to when it comes to the meta language or mnemonic forms for these is te and ma would stand for nerasai, right? Te is for sweet and ma is mango. Interestingly, all are botanical names, you see. Based on that, and then for Nirayasai, it is Puli and Vilam. Puli, tamarind, Vilam is wood apple. Right? These are the mnemonic form. So if the grammar says that tema, it is ner ner. Right? Instead of saying ner ner, you say tema. Right? If you say ku vilam would be ner nirai. Vilam is nirai. Ku is an empty one. So vilam, the wood apple which is empty inside. That is ku vilam. Right? Karu vilam, dark wood apple, would be nirai nirai. Right? Karu is nirai. Vilam is nirai. Right? So once you say that karu vilam, you would have in your head that it is nirai and nirai, and then when you go to the 3 C's, you will add kai for ner. Right? So tema is 2 ner C. So when you add tema and gai, it becomes 3 asai. A seed with 3 asai, and it ends in ner. Right? And then you say te mang kani, it is te mang kani, ner ner nirai, which ends in nirai seed. But it would have 3 asais in that. So if you read the rules, you will say that kai chir. So when you say kai chir, you will understand that it has three asai, and it would include Temangai, Pulimangai, Kubilangai, whatever ends in ka. So I think the combinations would be it is 2 to the power of 3,
Yes,
right?
eight
Eight possibilities, right? So if you say Kai Chir, it would include 4 seeds. If you say Kani Chir, that would include 4 seeds, 4 types of seeds. So this is a shortened way of saying that this pa requires Kai Chir, this pa requires Kanichi, right? So it's a very handy way of saying that. This is not the only meta language. Different teachers and different commentators use different, they call it Y-body, the formula for that, but this has become standard. I mean, most people use this thema thing rather than the other one, right? So then okay, so this you have to remember that the notion Yel and Uri would come repeatedly. See, with regard to Asai, Yel Asai is only Ner Nirai. Uri Asai would be Nebu Nerebu. And when you come to Sir, also they would talk about Yerchir and Urichir. Yerchir is roughly the 2 Asai Sir, right? And Urichir would be 3 Asai Sir. And the reason it's called Urichir is it is specific for a particular pa. Right? So it is like Uripurulinaham. So it belongs to it's specific to a particular thine. Right? So one chir is particular pa. So that is Urichir. So the grammars would be described using these terms, and the point is okay. So we will. I think we don't have time. So I will. I think in the handout I gave some of the verses which would bring out some of the problems we have in finding asai. The basic point we will come to is that ultimately the Osai would decide. Right? So when you are counting or measuring the Osai, suppose you find something is not right, so you can drop that in counting. Right? Particularly the wu ending. And sometimes you find something wanting, then you can add something. What the commentators say is that you can prolong that last vowel. Right? So all this suggests that it is the rhythm which will decide. Even though physically you don't have certain matra, you don't have certain letters. Right? So the Osai will determine how that asai should be taken.